All right. Hello. Everybody got me? Nope. How about there we go. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate everybody being patient in our mishaps up here. But we got Mr. Hartman caffeinated, so I think we'll get through the next little bit. We'll get together. I got a cherry Coke and a Coke Zero over there if anybody's interested. All right, we're going to roll right into the General Government Appropriations meeting subcommittee here. Excuse me? Yeah, Representative Prince, if you'll open us in a word of prayer real quick.
Let us pray. Eternal God, our Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your wisdom, your guidance, but most of all, your Son, Jesus. Give us the wisdom, the insight that we need to make better decisions for this great state of Georgia. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. All right, we're going to roll right in to DNR. Come on down. Committee, we're looking at section 34, page 15, if you'd like to follow along.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's great to be back and present DNR's FY24 budget and our Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Act project slate. The Department of Natural Resources can be found on FY 2024 can be found on pages 15 through 16 of your tracking sheets. Give everybody a minute. Of course, the department's very grateful for the governor. One of the first things you'll see is our $2,000 cost of living adjustment for full-time benefits eligible employees. We only have a few primary changes in addition to the statewide changes that are found across all agencies related to premiums, teamwork billings, and merit systems assessment billing, or fringe benefits, as we like to call them. On page 15, you'll see line 34.4.1, $1,050,961 was added to our base budget to make the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Fund whole, that we'll be talking about in a little bit. On page 16, 34.6.4, we have an increase of $217,857 in our law enforcement division for service contracts related to the new statewide radio system funded in the amended FY23 budget. So that will be DNR's portion of that overall public safety contract for radios. Just below that, in our State Parks and Historic Sites Division, section 34.7, it removes the one-time funds for the Georgia State Games Commission and Sam Shortline Railroad, which are both pass-through funds through our department. Wildlife Resources has two items. Line 34.9.4 shows a decrease of $24,945 to the Wildlife Endowment Trust Fund. And as we discussed in our joint appropriations meeting, this item should actually be an increase of $27,470. And this fund is based on actual lifetime sportsman license revenue, and we've been in touch with OPB regarding the error. And so we'd ask that that be corrected. So we didn't sell less licenses, which is the good news. We actually sold a few more. On line 34.9.5, we have a one yes item to use existing wildlife endowment funds for fish hatchery renovations and construction of a wildlife management area maintenance shop. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer any questions on the budget, or we can move on and talk about GOSA.
Anybody going to chime in here? I got we got one, all right. We got Chairman Parsons.
Thank you, Chairman. Good to see you. Been seeing you here for a long time now.
Yes, sir.
You were still a young man when you first got that job.
A lot great. 14 years will put a little gray hair on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I left the house, I was just as dark-headed as I could be.
Me too.
I wanted to ask you about this 34.8 Solid Waste Trust Fund. I came in just as you were talking about it, and I apologize.
Mr. Chairman, that will be on EPD's portion.
Okay.
I'm not over EPD, so.
That's why. That's why I'm confused, because they were in here the other day and we talked. I asked questions about that,
Yes,
so
sir.
I should have known. I didn't need to ask you a question about it.
No, I got all the fun stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Hunting and fishing.
They did mention that. And that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies. You might have said something. I might have missed it. So what was the one-time funds eliminated for the Southwest Georgia Railroad Excursion Authority, the SAM short line?
That was eliminated in the budget,
Right.
and that's a pass-through for us.
Right.
The Sammy Short Line's the railroad down from Georgia Vets State Park, I think goes to Plains.
Yeah, it goes to Plains,
It was added
Georgia.
last year, and it was taken out of this year's budget, but they passed through our agency.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Well, I'd like to ask, so capital projects, I mean, obviously I know that, you handle a wide range of things. I know that every now and then we throw some vehicles your way and what have you. Are there capital things that aren't being funded that we haven't discussed that, I mean, I'm sure you can come up with a wish list, but I just,
Well, we were happy with the governor's budget proposal. We have a list of deferred maintenance at our parks, our 60 state parks. We're able to handle a lot of that. I'll give my parks a little shout out. They run about 80 to 82% self-sustainable without any outside funding with the monies they generate. And we invest park pass monies right back into that site. Obviously, there's a want and a need list, but we hit the needs first, and the General Assembly's been very good every year to keep adding money to that so we can keep chipping away at some of those parks. And our vehicles inventory is getting a little aged, but y'all been good to us on that front as well, and we just keep replacing them as we go.
staffing wise, vacancies, head count, can you speak to that? a little bit?
We're in good shape. We've seen some turnover. I know you've heard that in a lot of agencies, but with younger employees, it's more quality of life. With us, DNR, natural resources and natural resource protection doesn't take holidays, doesn't take off weekends, and so with a lot of new employees, it's more quality of life issues than it is salary. So we've tried to institute a lot of flex scheduling to give folks more time off. But staffing wise, across our divisions, even our LE, our law enforcement, we got a high of 251, and that was back in the early 2000s. We'll be at about 218, which is the highest it's been in my 14 years. We're very appreciative of that. And we've got when that academy graduates, that's where we'll be in April. We've got another academy planned, which will even add to that. We'll have some retirements, but I think we're in pretty good shape.
And with the LEs you mentioned, I know that we've been leaning on them here and there to come up to Atlanta and do various things. Can you speak to a little bit of that and what that's added to their workload and what they're taking on? Of the 218 you mentioned,
Yeah.
how many of those does it affect? Can you
Well,
speak to that a little bit?
We have a special ops unit that was, part of the task force that helped the city of Atlanta with their new police facility they want to build. They've been there several occasions. We've been a part of the governor's crime suppression task force in Atlanta. That's, I believe, I don't have my LE here with me. I think it's 1 weekend a month, maybe 2, and we rotate the game wardens out. But they come up and stand side by side with the rest of the state public safety folks and do that. We're sort of the tip of the spear on natural disasters. Just recently, we were in Griffin at daylight. We get in there as quick as we can get there, and that crosses all my divisions. Law enforcement does search and rescue, helps with traffic control. We have our WRD, Wildlife Resources crews, which deal in the woods every day with equipment. They clear the roads, sort of the tip of the spear in there. Pembroke had a bad tornado this past year that we were heavily involved with. And not to leave out parks, they play an important role. When we have a huge hurricane or a natural disaster, we stop taking reservations at our parks. And just for example, in Matthew, if you remember Matthew, there's been some hurricanes since, but we had 12,500 evacuees staying at our parks. And so DNR's got a very big role when it comes to public safety for all of Georgia citizens and natural disaster coming into the affected area and providing big services to help supplement local agencies.
I appreciate that, and appreciate Chairman Yurda being patient with my questions. I know you have one over there, so
Well,
we'll go to Chairman Yurda now.
You talked so long you got around to asking my question, actually. So. No, thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I appreciate you being here. I did have retention, and you mentioned that y'all are having success with attracting and retaining employees. Certainly it's a challenge with law enforcement, but y'all are doing a good job with that. So that sounds great. My question, during the pandemic, the state parks had record number of visitors, and is that still the case in the state parks?
Yes, we've seen people. Well, let me back up. To my knowledge, and I believe I'm right, we were the only state that kept all boat ramps, all our beaches, all our state parks, all resident and non-resident hunting, non-resident and resident fishing, and all our wildlife management areas. We stayed on a regular schedule. So very proud of that. Proud we had a governor that led that way and with us. So I want to thank all my employees. I do it every chance I get, because early on, it was a little scary. We didn't know what we were dealing with, and they bought into it. My division directors, I have Jeff Cowan back here with me that runs our parks, and that filtered down to our employees, and they all bought in and decided if people can't do anything else, they can get outside.
Right.
And it was scary for them. Little easier decision for me, because early on I was quarantining with 2 sets of grand twins. Because we couldn't go down a babysitter. We had no bench. And but anyway, but getting out, they had a great attitude, and we have seen a lot of those guests. I'm looking at Jeff from our friends to the south in Florida and the Carolinas that are continuing to come back to our parks. Our parks were so busy that on about 5 of them we had to call DOT and the State Patrol to help us with traffic, and we were going one in, one out with cars and stuff. So glad we did it, and we're enjoying some return success from that.
Okay. What's the most visited state park in Georgia?
Sweetwater
Okay.
Creek, right
All
out west of us.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, any other questions?
With that, you should have a folder there, Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Act folder. Won't go completely through the statute, but basically it calls for several steps. We have our trustee board that are appointed by the governor, lieutenant governor, and then some agency heads that are on that. They meet first. They approve a slate of projects. They've done that. Then my DNR board approves a slate of projects, which they've done that a couple of weeks ago. And then it goes to both chambers. This committee, the Senate approved it a few days ago. So this will be the last step to award these projects. And I think it's a great list. The ebbs and flows, we don't have set in stone percentages. Last year it was heavier on local projects. This year it's heavier on land acquisition, which some of those are local projects, but they're land acquisition. So we think it's a good slate, but Mr. Chairman, it does require action from this committee.
That's right. So committee, for those of you, make sure you guys have seen that list in your folders. We do have one question, and we'll discuss if there's any other discussion prior to entertaining a motion on approving this slate. Chairman Smith.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation, and also for the way you handle this process. I know that there have been some areas of our state who have applied and maybe didn't have particular information, but you have a resource available to our counties if you're not on this list, and the emphasis is shared areas to qualify, but what's encouraging is sometimes it's difficult for a small government to go through the whole process. And I want to thank you for being a resource as well as awarding your contracts.
Well, and I'll shout out to Taylor that runs our grants program, and she's out on maternity leave. She's coming back soon, but these are some, and we have to have a lot of town halls for a lot of different issues and the public process, and these are our most well-attended by local governments. Even through COVID, the online participation was phenomenal. We open it up in August, so it's time to, start talking to your locals to get these projects in. We had $78 million this year. I think we had $78 million worth of applications. We awarded right here in front of you about $28 million, so that's how competitive it is. For the ones that didn't get it, we get back with them and we help them make their project better for the next year.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the effort. I'll recognize Chairman Smith for a motion.
Pardon me, I had one more observation to make. My comment made it appear that it's just local governments that get engaged, and it's a much broader paintbrush for all of these. Not-for-profit groups can get involved. A community activist who can pull together the different people. Overall, the mission is what is a good resource for the state of Georgia. So it can't be somebody's little playpen. It has to be a much bigger playground to
Right.
succeed.
Projects of regional significance.
Right.
Chairman Prince.
Mr. Chairman, at the proper time, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the conservation projects list for 2023.
I believe this is the proper time.
So move.
Second.
Here in a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. You have your slate. Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Chairman. Thank y'all.
All right, we're going to be moving on to Department of Labor. Commissioner Thompson, come on down. Committee, we're looking at section 32, page 14.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. First of all, it's my first time coming before you as your new labor commissioner. I'm hoping that you're already seeing there is a radical change in the direction of the Department of Labor. We want to make sure that we're not only transparent, but we're providing the information you need to make good decisions. There is no shortage of opportunity for us to address some of the concerns and opportunities, as I'll call it, that we keep uncovering. One of the things I'll have my budget director step up and we'll take you through the track sheet, and then we can come back and step back to 2023. But Janelle's with us today. Our current CFO is out with COVID, so she's not with us today. So Janelle, you want to step up here real quick?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. As far as our budget is concerned, we're section 32 on page 60. Most of the changes are based on what the governor has included in the budget, the COLA, the $2,000 cost of living, and then also the other statewide adjustments. So there haven't been any other, other substantive changes to the budget thus far. If you have any questions about any of the statewide adjustments, I can be sure to ask. And did you want to get into the ads? Okay. Now, as far as the FY24 requests that we have as an agency, we have two items. The first is an ad for $1.7 million for additional funds to actually fund the COLA. The money that was added in the governor's recommendation is not enough to cover the full cost of the COLA. So the total cost to fund it would be $1.7 million. And then the second one is an add of $7.2 million, and that is to cover staff retention costs for staff that did not transfer to TCSG during the Wagner-Pizer transition. And so those are the two items that we have.
All right. A couple questions. We'll start with Chairman Prince.
All right, thank you. And going to your ads, you mentioned about that cost of living adjustment. Would you add more people or something? I mean, how did the number come off so far away?
Okay, so when I guess when OPB and the governor's office added the funds, they only added about $30,000, and we have over 1,000 employees. And
so they miscounted your employees? Or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Chairman Prince, so much like my misunderstanding of how Department of Labor operates, sometimes it can be a little confusing. We have certain buckets, right? And so we have most of our funding comes from the feds. So that COLA is only for those that are 100% state. Gotcha. Unfortunately, when you come over and look at the Department of Labor, you think of it as like going into a restaurant. There's not just one person dedicated to that. They move down the line to do things, which means they charge to different grants, but then all of a sudden they're over here administrative for state. In this case, they only address those pure 100% state employees. That's not how we're funded. So we're going back and saying the ones that maybe 70%, 80% over here, but 20% over here, we're trying to give a cost of living across the board because you can't divvy that up. Does that make sense?
Yep. Miscounted. Got it.
Chairman Smith.
Thank you for your presentation. And I guess I have more of a long range question. As you said, you had 1,000 employees, but as a legislator in our office during COVID and during this transition period of time, it appeared that there was not very good response to our constituents from the Department of Labor. And so at some point, I assume you're going to be bringing us forward a different proposal of how to be better service to our general public. If you're not ready to address that, then that's a future question. But first and foremost, that has been, well, I'll put it this way. Even the Speaker of the House at that time could not get an answer. So that explains where I fit in that little phone call Rolodex. But so at some point, I know you well, and I know you're going to address that, but I think it would be encouraging to know that is a projection for the future.
Let me add, if you might, maybe,
sure.
Before you start. So, and along those lines, it kind of plays into something I was going to say, which you spoke to a radical shift, maybe in mentality, which I appreciate greatly. I don't know, for members that have been on this committee before, it's not necessarily a radical shift in the requests. So, speaking to what Chairman Smith said, I think that there obviously have been some heartburn over the last couple of years on how the department is run. And when we're looking at the very similar requests, seems like it's very, we'd like to know how it's going to be different.
Sure. I think that's fair. I will say this. I was not here during COVID, right? The reason I am here is because of the response that we didn't get at COVID. So had zero interest in running for this position until we all experienced it together, me on the Senate as well. I will just say, and for those that are with us now in adopting the culture of my administration, I don't apologize with where we are, but I do apologize for the way that they behaved before. We could not get through to the Department of Labor. The governor's office, a lot of us went to the governor's office, couldn't get through. Some of that is we just didn't understand what they were encountering, and they did a very, very poor job of being advocate for their own department, so we couldn't get answers out of that. They went from an average about 300,000 claims to 4 million in 1 month. They were not adequately prepared for that, and unfortunately the Department of Labor is very heavy on human capital and not so much on technology. I seek to change that. That's why we are already, we leave at 6 o'clock to go to DC once again, 2 weeks in a row, to help them try and understand. There's $102 million out there of federal funding that we let expire on December 31st that would have helped us modernize for the next crisis. So unfortunately, our state auditor is sitting back here. He understands. We have not been very responsive in the past. Some of it's an unwillingness to do it. The other part is, because of the way this department is organized and structured, when they need a lot of those details, it's human capital that does it instead of modernization. So that's over here. That's not a state ask. I commit we're going to get that done so that we're current. We're utilizing a 1982 system. It's the oldest in the country, that have just been layered and layered and layered. When you had a spike of COVID, we had new programs from the feds for them to learn and a spike in numbers that didn't put the demand on the people. This right here, Mr. Chairman, is a different situation. We were running 4,000 employees years ago, and each year they have reduced that. Now, some would argue and say, well, it's you had a reduction in responsibility. I would submit to you some of that, yes. The other part of it is, again, understanding how the Department of Labor works. If we're just going to be a UI and unemployment office and not be a career center where that's federally what's expected, it's a full life cycle, then I understand we can operate on 1,200 employees the way we are. If you want that full life cycle so you're not getting the calls in your district where people can't get help in a career center or a problem with their claim or an appeal or anything like that, then we've got to take our 1,200, modernize federally over here, what we're talking about, but reinforce the structure of what we got here. We literally could probably operate on 800 or 900 employees in about 2 years because now we become efficient. But I cannot give you an efficient agency if we gut it. We've got to make sure we're taking care of business to then get us where I think you want us to be.
Now, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the energy. Hopefully you'll see some successes there.
Mr. Chairman, you'll see one movement already, I'm hoping in here, is we were not able to get into the Department of Labor to get answers. You've got Sam Dendoffer sitting back here who is assigned to you as a legislative part of our external affairs, that his sole responsibility is to take care of the executive branch and legislative branch. And you've got one person over at the DOL now is assigned to make sure those needs on a daily basis are taken care of. That is a radical change, I would submit to you.
Appreciate that. All right, we'll go to Chairman Parsons.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. I got a question about the request. I do recall that on this cost of living, that this was an issue, I think last year also, whenever the last time this came up, I guess was last year, that the number that the governor's office had suggested was below what was actually needed. I do recall that. I wanted to ask you about the staff retention cost, but I did want to say that, and I know that you know this, I mean, you've been there now for 2 months or whatever. I know that you know that.
30 days, sir. 30 days. 30 days on the 12th.
Okay, 30 days, even with 30 days. But I know that you have some really good employees there too. I think that
Absolutely.
there's been and I think you covered this, that I mean, it was an avalanche all of a sudden that the employees, I just know that you have some really good ones there. I do know that. And even in the time that we couldn't get a response, there was an employee or two, including a former administrative assistant we had in Appropriations, as a matter of fact, who's been over there, maybe a couple of them. And I do know that they worked very, very hard, and they were very helpful when we went around channels and got to one or two of those persons. They helped, and they did everything that they could possibly do. So I'm sure that they're not the only ones, but I'm sure you have some. And as far as the whole employee base that you have, I don't know, but you know that much better than I do. But I just thought we ought to mention that because we had, as been mentioned, getting in and getting answers was virtually impossible during that time. But there were some exceptions of people really working hard. Maybe a lot of them, I don't know, but I know that a few really did. And I'm sure that you've seen that since you've been there. But I did want to ask you about the in this fiscal year 2000 request about the staff retention. If you could just kind of explain what that 7 million, I think, a little over 7 million. What would that actually be?
So one of those employees you're talking about standing next to me. So there's a champion right there. But you may be talking about Tammy, and there's plenty of winners that are over there.
I am talking about her. I didn't want to mention names, but
It's okay. I don't mind.
She's
We
exceptional.
we have a cultural response that is coming out. If you come on our campus, you'll see people are now speaking to each other. They're responsive. They understand what the charge is. But in regards to the staff retention costs, let's go back to the way Department of Labor operates. I think the closest to that might be ag, and that we have some federal funded employees as well. And so under our situation, and I voted for it as well, and I'll just say it for what it was. We had a Department of Labor that was not responsive to us in a number of years, transitions over 2 governors. And so the only action you can take with a constitutional office is funding. That's how you try and get them to behave. And so Wagner Pizer was a primary funding mechanism for us. It's a federal program. You can see in the budget over here, 6.1 million from the state. The rest of our 160 million in the past came from Wagner Pizer. We voted, we moved or gave the designation to the governor, and the governor felt like TCSG needed to become the proprietor of that, which moves some of that away. Not here to argue whether that's the right decision or not. I'll let you decide that. But what I will say is the 1,200 employees that we had, again, as we scaled down, most of those employees are working on UI and other things as well. And so if you try and move some of those employees, 200 plus employees, over to the department, over to the TCSG or somewhere else, and you displace them, the people that are still there, you moved $100 million of our $160 million budget, but we're still left with nearly 700 to 800 employees when you're done, assuming they all take the job, that we need to be able to process claims, unless you want to go back to, and I know you don't, thousands of people calling you because they can't get an answer. Because the agency was built around human capital instead of modernization. Once we fully modernize in a couple of years, the average modernization for a state, and most states have gone there, the best is Wyoming, 31 months. I want to get it done a lot quicker, but it's going to take us a little time to get there. Then we can bring that staff count down. That's what this is. If these people walk out, you're going to be yelling at me worse than you were yelling at my predecessor. Is that? Yes, sir. And thank you for your comments. I do have a great team.
We'll go down to Floor Leader Gamble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My comments kind of go back to what we were discussing a minute ago about the vision of where you're going. And I will say that in the 30 days that you've been in office, I've received more communication from you and your staff during that time than I have in the previous 4 years. And I want to thank you for that. And I know that you are in there working hard to try to figure things out, which is no surprise to me. But I did want to just thank you for your service there.
I appreciate that. It's not just me. I've got two others that are sitting here. Three, really. We've talked about Sam. Most of you know Ethan Stiles. He hates us when I do this, but Ethan is approaching 300 hours this month alone. He is in there day and night to figure it out to the bottom, to expedite while you're in session so that you can experience where our goal is look, feel, and be different at the Department of Labor, and that's what we're trying to do. Of course, you know, next to him is probably the person with the toughest job, and that is Hannah Harding. She is a special assistant to me to keep me out of trouble, as well as the Chief Development Officer. So we've got a good team up and down, and I thank you for that comment.
All right, as long as Ethan's not banking those hours for the summer, we're good.
I'm a fiscal conservative. I can assure you what's happening.
Chairman Yurda.
Legally, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many locations throughout the state does the Georgia Department of Labor have?
So we have 42 locations around the state, and then we have our main property here that are there out there to serve your constituents.
Right. Percentage of employees in here at the headquarters in Atlanta, what would that be as compared to the rest of the
I'm going to let her answer that. I have a gasp, but I want to be closer.
We have about 135 employees out of the roughly 1,000 that we have.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Of those locations, how many are open?
They're all open, but whether they're functioning the way they're supposed to, that's the real answer.
Chairman Smith.
Thank you, and thank you for your very frank and to the point answers. I was going to say, it sounds to me like you have a few good men, but that wouldn't be true. You have a
And
few,
women.
and I'm going to say, and women. You've got a few good people. But here's another difficult constituent concern that I've received during this period of time, and I'm curious to see if you have a special team to deal with that, and it's personal ID theft. Some of them are receiving subpoenas because their ID has been taken, and so, and I know that you've got some people working on that. I think it might be reassuring to hear what you're doing in that particular area.
I'm not trying to give you a political answer, but I'm going to give you a political answer, okay? So without getting into the details, I will tell you, I don't believe the IG was ever in the previous 12 years over in the campus Scott and I, our previous, has been on campus. We're working on that. We've got a great relationship with the GBI, the FBI, the IG, obviously our state auditor. Our responsibility is to make sure that we are only paying out your money, the taxpayers' money, and claims to those that are duly earned it, and we only pay that amount in an expeditious manner. Anyone that is committing fraud, true fraud, we seek to make sure we prosecute that to stop it. Now, there is some misinformation out there. Sometimes people think fraud is every one of the people that took money or received benefits that weren't entitled to that. I would submit to you there are some people, unfortunately, were misinformed and they applied and received benefits. If that was the case, it was not intentional, and we are seeking to recover those funds to make sure that restitution is paid, but that's not what we want to seek to prosecute. It's the bad actors that are stealing IDs and that are going out there, and we are in full force to make sure that that not only is stopped, but prosecuted.
Follow. So if someone calls me and says my ID they're trying to get money from me and somebody's using my ID and I have no way to prove that they don't even believe who they are. So to whom can we refer these constituents to if they call your office?
Well, the first thing is that's a criminal activity. Someone's stolen it, so they need to
Right.
file a police report and go through the proper channels.
And they did that.
Okay.
So.
The second is I'll get with you offline, but yes, there is a process to be able to look at those and make sure we're not paying out fraudulent claims.
I think that would help. Be
Yes,
very
ma'am.
reassuring. Thank you.
Speak to one other thing real quick. Internally, I'm assuming that there might be some concerns there too, some bad actors, and I don't mean to speak ill will of anybody in particular, but are we looking at both sides of the fence?
Internal and external?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Well, and I'll close with this. I appreciate that. I want to echo what Chairman Parsons said. We as elected officials often only get called when we're getting yelled at. You got, the Department of Labor took on a monumental task, and for the employees that stuck through that and dealt with that, I just want to publicly thank you. I appreciate what you guys do. I hope that it certainly seems like we're heading in the right direction. I think I told you somewhere along the campaign trail, I hope you get in there and clean some things up. So I know you're a man of your word, and we look forward to you doing that very thing.
May I close out with one comment? One of the things that we ran into is obviously during the pandemic, we were utilizing an Excel spreadsheet in our offices to submit requests or comments and so on. We are in 2023, right? So there's a legislative portal that was built. It's not final the way I'd like to see it, but we're going to introduce that to your offices in the next week as soon as I get back from D.C. Come in and show you how to do that. Not for you to be handling these. This is our responsibility to make it easier, and then I keep saying this, transparent. You'll be able to go in and see when someone calls what our disposition is and how quickly we're working on these claims versus you wondering. And so, again, we're moving forward to make sure we're using technology to be utilized to be able to serve the customer, but also give you an answer so they don't continue to call you. That's coming very soon.
I appreciate that greatly from somebody who submitted that spreadsheet. I can't even imagine how many times, and wouldn't know if anything happened with it until the next time I got that same person calling me back. I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks
Chairman
for being
and
here.
members of the committee.
Appreciate you. All right, we're going to move on to the Department of Audits. Greg, you in the audience? There you are. Right. Yeah. Didn't see you behind the post there. I apologize. Committee, we're on section 4, page 1. Mr. Griffin, have at it.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. We did not meet on our amended budget, so this is the first time we are before you this year, and we're glad to be here. So, as the chairman said, my name's Greg Griffin. I'm the state auditor and the department head for the Department of Audits and Accounts. Our agency has about 250 employees. Those staff are located throughout the state. We have 5 physical locations throughout the state. We have 4 virtual offices, and the majority of our staff reside here in the Atlanta area. Some quick highlights. We issue about over 300 audit opinions a year. We conduct 20 performance and special examination audits each year. We perform quality reviews on local government audits and nonprofits, and that totals to over 1,000 each year. And my staff also develops and issues the statewide equalized adjusted property tax digest. So we have a staff of about 20 real estate appraisers that work on that digest annually. You can find our budget information in section 4, the tracking sheets. So we administer 4 budget programs. Program 4.1 is where all of our audit services are captured, whether it's a financial audit or performance audit, compliance, and so forth. 4.2 is our administrative program. 4.3 is our legislative services activities, and 4.4 tracks the cost for the group that works on the tax digest. Our budget is comprised of mostly personnel costs, so our budget, roughly 90% of our budget is personnel, and we are funded almost entirely by state appropriations. I do want to mention that we do bill agencies for our federal single audit work that we perform, and we have collected about $2 to $2.5 million a year that we collect and remit back to the Treasury to be reappropriated each year. In terms of our FY24 budget request, we are requesting additional funds for personnel services to keep our current salaries competitive and close to our market competition. So the total cost of our request is about $1.2 million, and that includes related overhead costs or fringe benefits, as one of our previous speakers mentioned. And this $1.2 million is spread across all of those 4 programs that have personnel. So that's in section 4.1, 4.2, and 4.4. Recent compensation studies that we've reviewed indicate that general industry employers are planning to adjust their salary structures by 3 to 4%. Our request equates to a 3% increase to our salary structure, and it also equates to an average performance-based merit-type pay increase of 3%. And again, this is to keep pace with our anticipated competitive market changes. It allows us to better retain our current staff and attract qualified candidates to backfill our turnover. I should note that our request is independent of the governor's COLA, recommended COLA of $2,000 per employee, and we're not asking that our request be additive to that. Consistent with what you've heard from other agencies, attraction and retention is one of our biggest challenges and has been since the pandemic. Lots of people want to work remotely. We've lost a number of staff because they wanted to work remotely 100%. Ours is a team sport, so that doesn't work very well. With your help, last year we were able to invest in our staff and bring our salary structure much closer to our market competition. For that, I want to just say we are very appreciative for your help. That investment has had a positive impact on our agency. Our current turnover rate is less than 5%. Our historical turnover rate has been between 15 and 16% over the last 5 to 10 years, actually. So our funding request, again, will allow us to keep pace with the anticipated market changes, maintain the progress that we achieved in the past year. Now our budget's going to look a little different than some of the others that you're going to see. So for budget purposes, we are considered a legislative agency. That means we submit our budget to OPB. The governor and OPB cannot change our budget. Only you as legislators can change our budget. So our budget does not contain the statewide changes that you've heard talked about, and does not include the governor's recommended $2,000 per employee. I will say we've sort of estimated what those statewide changes are for our agencies, less than $5,000. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that's our request for FY24, and I'll be glad to take any questions you or the committee have. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I'll recognize Chairman Prince.
I thank you, sir, for this good briefing, and I definitely want to try to keep quality people in the jobs. And I see this increase that you're requesting. You mentioned it's probably around $5,000 per, just on average per person. Is that sort of kind of?
Our request is a 3% increase, 3% of salary increase per employee. So it depends on what their current salaries are.
Right. So, but that does sort of help them keep in step with.
It keeps us with the
competition.
3% general market that is that the private sector, if you will, our competition is, you're going to see over the next year.
Good
Does
deal.
it equate to a $5,000 increase? No, it is not.
I
It's
thought I heard you
closer.
say
It's
5,000.
actually closer to the $2,000 that the governor is recommending.
That's all. Okay. Good.
Can you maybe tell the committee about some of the work the agency's done related to some funds added to audit COVID-19 related programs?
COVID-19. So we audit a fairly substantial amount of the federal funds that are coming into the state. We conduct that work under the Federal Single Audit Act. So we are at agencies like DCH, DHS, anybody that's received a significant amount of federal funds. We have, as part of our audits, we audit local school boards. They've received a lot of COVID funds. We audit those dollars that are flowing into those entities as well.
Well, I certainly appreciate that work. I think the amount of money that has come from up on high, we need to make sure those funds were being used appropriately. So I certainly appreciate that work. I'm happy to hear about your turnover rate. Obviously, that's something that a lot of agencies can't come in here and herald. So that's fantastic work.
We certainly appreciate your investment in us from last year. I think it's paying dividends.
Well, thank you very much. And I don't see any other questions. I appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we're going to move on to DDS. Commissioner Moore.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you again for having the agency come discuss our budget needs for the FY24.
Commissioner Moore, if I may interrupt you for 2 seconds, I apologize. Section
sir.
21, page 8 in our tracking sheets for the committee. Apologize.
Oh, yes, sir. That's fine. We're really appreciative, first of all, to the governor for his support and the support of this committee over the last few years. You've heard some responses relative to agencies' responses to COVID. We were one of those agencies that did not close and continue to serve customers. And it's my hope that you receive very few calls from constituents relative to driver services. We have some really great people. They're working very hard in order to keep our roads safe with safe drivers, as well as the big topic that we'll talk about mainly today is commercial driving. So we do have a slide deck for you. In the interest of time, I won't go fully through that slide deck. There's some summary information that's in that deck that will give you a general outlook of how the agency is performing. We're one of the better performing driver licensing agencies around the country. 99.8% of our customers and our citizens are Real ID compliant. Many states are struggling to get anywhere close to that number. We're fortunate as a state to have 8.9 people who are 8.9 million customers who are already enrolled in Real ID. I will go specifically to address from the tracking sheet, page 8, and I follow along that tracking sheet in our slide deck, which I believe is page 4. Beyond the statewide ask that we're certainly appreciative of, the increase in funds to provide the $2,000 cost of living increases is significant for our staff. The $5,000 last year was significant for our staff and certainly helped for us to recruit and retain the examiners that we have. But I won't, unless you need me to go into that specific number, I will address line items 21.2.5, 21.2.6, and 21.2.7, which is the new ads specific to the agency, and of course, entertain any questions if there are some. We are seeking $488,000 to leverage an already provided $1.2 million to build a customer service center down in Hazelhurst, Georgia. So a couple budgets back, the General Assembly allowed for us to build or start to build a center down in Hazelhurst. That construction is well underway. What we're hoping to do now, along with the construction that we're completing in Douglas County, and a third one in Forsyth County, not in Forsyth County, in Forsyth, Georgia. We are hoping to keep the $1.2 million that you provided for the construction of for the Hazelhurst Center to allow for us, and then add the $488,000 for the operations of those centers. In other words, we need people and we need the infrastructure in order to make those particular staff members work. We're estimating about 35 new examiners will be a part of those 3 centers in operation. Keep in mind, these are CDL locations, meaning CDL is a high demand career initiative. One of the the priorities that the agency has taken over the last few years is to ensure that we increase the number of drivers, CDL drivers on the road. So these examiners will help to do that, obviously. So that explains the request. In total, we estimate right at $1.6 million in order to have continuous operation for those 3 centers that is proposed in 21.2.5. So the 1.2 adding to 488,000 will help us to achieve that goal. In line item 21.2.6, we're seeking funds to hire 2 CDL analyst positions to improve the auditing and certification of the programs that we currently have under the CDL program. We only have 6 for the entire state at the moment. Again, we have within that presentation some background about what those analysts are doing. They're essentially monitoring, auditing, training every CDL examiner that we have in the state, both state examiners as well as third-party examiners. So we have not increased the analyst over the years as we've increased staff. We certainly are hoping that the committee will be favorable to those increase of 2 CDL analysts for this purpose. And the last item is 21.2.7 is to provide funds for increased systematic alien verification and entitlements. SAVE is a program that is run by DHS. And for every individual that comes to our office who is not a citizen, they are run through that system to ensure that person is in this country or in our state, in this particular case, lawfully. The SAVE system is increasing its fees 50 cents per transaction starting this coming year. We're hoping to add the additional 50 cents, which will equal, based on the transactions that we did in prior years, of $105,433. We anticipate that this will be an increase over the next several years. They've already sent out a schedule of projection over the next several years. For example, it's currently costs us 50 cents to run every transaction. This coming year, it'll be $1. The following year, it'll be $1.50. 26, it'll be $2, et cetera, until you get a final increase of $3.10 in FY28. So we will need to increase funds as these this verification project continues to increase. Again, I have a lot of summary information that's provided in the packet, and I am here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. I'll start with one.
Sir.
You obviously mentioned the COLAs and some targeted pay adjustments that the General Assembly offered up. Can you tell us, is there a better breakdown? Are there positions that help more than others? Are there still specific positions that are more in need for your department than others?
Yes, sir. Our agency is highly reliant upon the examiners. That's the highest number of positions that we have. Of our roughly today 800, little over 800 persons, of roughly 550 or so of those are examiners. So they're the people that's providing the driver's license issuance at the time that a customer comes in. What we tend to see is the Metro Atlanta area has the highest turnover. When I started as commissioner back in 2017, the average pay for those employers was $22,640. We now have that up to a little bit over 30 with the $5,000 increases. It'll be 32 with obviously with the increase of the 2,000. But that, in the Metro Atlanta area specifically, that's a tough position to keep. That's where we see our greatest number of turnover. In the rural areas, not so much, but in Metro Atlanta, that's a high turnover area.
Thank you for that. One question on the save fees.
Yes, sir.
Just for point of clarification, so you're charging 50 cents?
No, sir. The federal government is charging us 50 cents every time we have to run us to ensure that the individual that's before us is here lawfully. Perfect. So they're going to start charging us $1 this year.
Up to $3.10.
Up to $3.10 in the next few years for every transaction that we run one of these persons.
Thank you for
Yes, sir.
clarification. Chairman, you're.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The fees you collect for licenses, does that go directly into your budget, or does that go into the general fund and then come back to you guys?
I wish it came directly to our budget, but no, sir. It comes to the general fund, and then it comes back to us in an appropriation. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
That's why we exist. Chairman, Chairman Smith.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. So
Thank you, Chairman.
in the marketplace, when you're recruiting employees, I don't know if the committee knows this or not, but they have to have a high level of security clearance to work with the Department of Labor. And then with that, so you're not just competing with someone without a college degree or some training. I think that might be helpful to explain to us why
Sure.
the Atlanta market's so hard.
Yeah, in prior committee meetings, I probably told this committee we were competing against retail, which we were, but the threshold is much higher for this job because you not only have to pass a criminal background, but also a financial background check. And as you know, in this day and age, that's difficult to achieve. So we're recruiting individuals that are able to achieve both that criminal as well as financial background and be in a position that they can perform this highly trusted job. They do have the information of all of our citizens. We regularly audit and check that information. We're able to, down to the keystroke, determine who did what as it relates to any credential that we issue. But Chairman Smith, you hit it on the head. It's very competitive in the Atlanta area. So if you're paying $32,000 annually, I don't know what that equals to in a per hour basis, but it's certainly not very competitive in the Metro Atlanta area.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I do not see any other questions.
Thank you, Mr.
We'll
Chair.
let you slide out.
We appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you
I
for your
appreciate
support.
you very much.
Yes, sir.
All right, we're going to move on. Y'all, for the benefit of the committee, Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors Board, we voted to move them out from under the direct umbrella of Secretary of State. I think Russ Pennington is in the crowd and is going to come address us for the first time. Appropriate amount of hazing will commence.
I think the hazing's warranted, Mr. Chairman.
We're going, so because they're administratively still under Secretary of State, we're going to section specifically 43.8. It's on page 22 in your tracking sheet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and
Mr.
members of the
Pennington.
committee.
Yeah.
My name's Russ Pennington. I am a board member and past chairman of the Professional Engineering and Land Surveying Professional Licensure Board. So we house the land surveyors in training, professional land surveyors, engineers in training, professional engineers, and structural engineering licenses within our board. I believe that y'all have the governor's recommended budget that was just over $1 million. We're not quite sure what went into that budget. I think that was the Secretary of State's office that presented that budget. So technically, I would like to ask for an increase of about $1.475 million. We came in with what we calculated based on the North Carolina Professional Engineering and Land Surveyor Licensure Board, which is almost an identical number of regulated individuals and companies. And that's kind of where we drove into the $2.5 million number. I will say, so last year, the General Assembly passed House Bill 476, which created an independent entity for the engineers and land surveyors licenses. Upon the passage of that, the board took action and increased our fees significantly. And we saw in fiscal year 23 budget a reflection of just under $3 million. It's $2.951 million is what the recognized budget was, which was also consistent with where we were thinking we would try to come in with a request for you all. So like the question for the Commissioner of Driver Services, those fees go directly to the general fund, and here we are groveling to get appropriations back out of that. So anyway, I believe y'all have a handout that we provided where we try to essentially come up with where North Carolina was in terms of where we were with regulation. The personal services, we came in at about $1.25 million, which was for an executive director, a deputy director, admin, 2 law enforcement folks, which we need to be able to do investigations from the kind of that law enforcement background entering the correct way, and then also have a couple of professional folks to support those law enforcements, where we're thinking we'd have engineers or land surveyors in their retired status that actually know what to look for upon those investigative complaints. We do have a couple of motor vehicles specifically to be able to get to those investigations and then be able to use for staff. Equipment, we're starting from scratch. So furniture, computers, et cetera. IT expenditures, we expect software to kind of be the key to this, where we would have interface. We'd like to have our own website, have an interface, have a licensure software where it manages what the license is. So you can do license verification, you can do a renewal, you can pay online. We have some situations today where we can't even have payments online, have to actually send a hard copy check to the Secretary of State's office, and just need to modernize everything with that. And then we put in rent. We based our rent basis on a Peachtree Center lease that was, so a nice Class B office space that's in Atlanta. We're looking at 80% of the regulated professionals under our licensure board are within that Metro Atlanta location. So we'd like to at least ask to get back to Atlanta as opposed to being housed within the Secretary of State's office, and we think that's where their budget was based off of in Macon. And then voice data communications, which we kind of pulled out of the real estate board just to get an idea of where that should be. And then contractual services. Contractual services, we had $100,000 in there. That is for professionals to be able to testify, to be able to help out with investigations, and then legal services as well, as we have complaints and can go through due process. But with that, I just want to keep it simple. If you got questions, I'm happy to jump in and answer them the best I can. But
I've got a few.
Okay.
So let's start with we increased the fees. So we came out from underneath the Secretary of State. What were they then? Now we are increasing the fees.
so they were $50 every other year. previously, and now they're $100 every year for the licensed professionals. So we quadrupled fees. And then the businesses, which we also regulate, had a $10 annual certificate of authorization. And so thought from a business perspective, we made everything $100 across the board. So 10 times on businesses, 4 times on professionals.
And how many, roughly, for the committee, how many people are registering? I mean, how many, these fees are being paid by how many people? How many businesses, how many licensees?
Sure. We have 25,000 individuals. 21,000, at the end of last year, we had 21,456 professional engineers, 1,260 structural engineers, and I know we just eclipsed the 1,500 mark on that, so there's slightly more today. 1,091 professional land surveyors, and 3,102 engineering firms. So I think the 2.951 million, which we recognized in 23, is a fairly conservative number. And then we also have any investigative complaints or any misdoings that result in a fine. That's additional revenue that we contribute to the general fund as well.
That's a perfect segue to my next question.
Okay.
So, in the Secretary of State's presentation to us last week, there was some commentary that seemed as though there had not been complaints. But we've heard the word complaint multiple times in your presentation. So can you speak to that a little bit and maybe the reality of that?
I won't address the Secretary of State's comment, if that's okay.
Not a problem.
But I will tell you the situation we're dealing with is that we have no one working right now to take complaints. There are no investigators. There are no licensed professionals to pry into it. For instance, this morning, I had a professor at the University of Georgia that had taken the professional engineering exam. He had passed it. He had not received his professional engineering number. He asked me, I pried to a specific individual, told him, you need to do this. In less than 5 minutes, he had his professional engineering number. There was just nobody there to do it. Our board members were paid a per diem for our board, which is about $100 a month. We do 6 meetings a year. So I will say that we're unpaid professionals. We're doing a lot of that ourselves, which is frankly what I think staff should be doing. And then we've had complaints. We've gone through formal processes, had attorneys, had hearings at our board meetings, taken people's licenses, and they're still out practicing. And we're told there's nothing you can do about it, and it continues. And as we're sitting here with all of this public infrastructure money that's coming down from both the federal level, the ARPA money that's coming on the local level from the feds through the state, there is more engineering and surveying work than has ever been had in the state's history. And I just think it's time we've got to take action and regulate our industry.
So some of these, understood, I mean, again, you guys are coming out on your own for the first time. So, right. I know that some of this stuff we are shooting in the dark. Educated guess. Let's go with educated guess. It's more engineering minded, right? So with services and these potential complaints, I mean, some of these numbers are somewhat arbitrary because we don't necessarily have a quantifiable number to work off of. Is that fair?
That's correct. And that's why we reached out. We looked at all the surrounding states. And for instance, I'll say Alabama has a fantastic board that is super responsive. But in talking with folks in the governor's office and elsewhere that are familiar with where other licensing boards are, we knew we were never going to try to emulate what Alabama has. And that's why we kind of landed on North Carolina and let's just back into where they are in terms of what their staff levels are, where they got IT numbers and what the licensure software, which I think the crux of our success is going to come with that interface with the licensure software. So that's where we're really seeking a lot of free consulting from other states, frankly.
Appreciate that. As you're running through positions, obviously I'm trying to count. I think we got up to 5, and then we started getting, which I appreciate, isolating specific roles. Can you give me just an idea of what you're thinking the total size of this staff will look like?
I think once we're completely full, I think we can do it with 7 people. And that's the executive director kind of having the buck stops with him, and hopefully he's standing here with you next year having this conversation. The deputy director to help out really with just all the other administrative stuff and the processing of everything, the interaction with the licensed community, and admin, where I think ultimately what the expectation is from our regulated community is customer service, frankly. And I'm hoping that having a dedicated admin can answer the phones, answer the emails, and respond to let them know that their questions aren't in cyberspace somewhere. And then a 4-person investigative team where we're looking at actually getting out, doing it the proper way through the legal channels, and then having a professional that can know what to look for once they get into the place.
Not to digress, I want to ask one follow-up on the fees. Do you really feel any pushback? I mean, honestly, I don't know that $100 is that much a year, especially for an engineer. But I just curious if you had pushback on that when those fees increased.
There has been a little bit, but the reality of it is the fees hadn't been increased in 25 years that I can speak to. I think we were one of the lower ones in the country, and we're in line. We're probably on the higher side, but we are in line with where other licensing boards are. I just knew that it's not fair to come and ask for money if you're not contributing to the money to get to it. And I think everybody was willing as long as we were able to get out and do our own independent board. And we've got, surveying groups and professional engineers and engineering companies all here in support, which I think covers the majority of the licensed community.
I appreciate it. I see no more questions. Maybe I asked them all. But all right.
Thank
Mr.
you very
Bennett,
much.
Thank you so. Oh, not so fast. Representative Stoner.
Just a quick comment. Full disclosure, I'm not an engineer, but I work for engineering firms. I do business development. But to your point, the fee that you're charging, we do work in 15 states, the company I work for. $100 is not a lot of money in reality. So if anyone's complaining, then they apparently aren't working outside the state of Georgia.
Right. Honestly, the biggest laugh was the $10 corporate fee every year. I was just like, really, it's time. Thank you all very much.
I appreciate it very much. All right, moving on. Mr. Turner is here. There he is, sitting, hiding from me. Georgia Access to Medical Cannabis Commission. Again, another one. We're still on page 22, I believe, and section 43.7.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members. Appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you about the Georgia Access to Medical Cannabis Commission FY24 budget and budget request. I'm Andrew Turnage. I'm the executive director for the commission. I've been in this role at this new state agency for about 31 months now. And very similar to the previous speaker for engineers, I'll just say we're still a startup agency, and we are seeking some assistance in building out the agency in a way that we feel like we can properly regulate this new industry in Georgia. Mr. Chairman, if it's acceptable, I'll start with your tracking sheet and the items that are listed there, and I'll be happy to answer any follow-up questions that you may have related to our budget request. The Medical Cannabis Commission appears at 43.7, and on the information that you have for the commission, of course, continues to be very appreciative of the support from the governor, the General Assembly, as it relates to the cost of living adjustments for our state employees. You can see that figure there with $20,349, and the line below it with some merit system adjustments of $554. There is a recommendation there to use existing funds on 43.7 as it relates to tracking. You can see a figure there for $20,903. I'd really like to address that with some information that we have received, Mr. Chairman, in doing our research on a required tracking component in the Georgia's HOPE Act. That's our seed to sale tracking software. It's a requirement for us to track every single plant or seed from the moment that it begins its life cycle all the way through until it reaches that patient at the retail point of sale. I'll just say, Mr. Chairman, that that's a very expensive software, and appreciate your consideration with amended 23 and considering our request for $250,000 as an initial cost. For FY24, I do anticipate the commission will need continuation or renewal money for that software. While I don't have that direct quote from vendors, we will need to conduct an RFP in order to get that information. I have provided your staff with some information from other states with similar programs that have completed and executed contract for seed to sale tracking within the last 5 years. It does depend on the size of the program for seed to sale tracking, but that figure typically runs somewhere between $60,000 and $180,000, depending on the size of the program, the number of licenses that are in that system. So again, it's very expensive software, but it's one that we're required to have in order to regulate the industry. Those are the items that appear on the tracking sheet that are in front of you, Mr. Chair. I know that the Commission has submitted a request for some additional funding as it relates to staffing, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you have related to what you see on the tracking sheet, and certainly happy to speak to our additional request if it's appropriate to do so.
Well, yeah, let's get to the additional requests, and then that might spur on some other questions. I have a few already, but.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity. Currently, the Commission is funded, as you can see there at the top line, at the 908 figure. I just want to reference that the original fiscal note for the Commission penned by the State Accounting Office and the Office of Planning and Budget afforded us a startup budget of $1.2 million. And so while this is our 5th fiscal year coming to ask for funding before the committee, like several of the presenters ahead of me, we are entirely dependent upon appropriations. And so while the Commission does have a limited license structure, the HOPE Act affords us only 6 licenses to be issued. Those fees are high, and they do fall in line with the budget that's outlined. However, we do not have any access to those funds, and we return those directly to Treasury and come and ask for our annual budget each year. While we have not been funded at the 1.2 initially, last fiscal year and this fiscal year, with funds that have been returned to the Commission to cover the costs of items such as software, such as some additional staff, and such as a cost for the protest process with the Administrative Office of State Administrative Hearings costs for legal fees. We have been very close to that initial budget amount that was outlined in that fiscal note. So I think that that's a good baseline to look at for our startup costs. What we have asked for with our FY24 budget ask request is to ask for 11 additional positions, and I can touch on those just briefly. One of the requests does center around the ongoing legal and litigation-heavy nature of the cannabis industry. While it may seem like something that's new or of great interest as it relates to the state of Georgia, the litigation and the associated fees are not uncommon for this industry in every state in which it has begun. We are the 37th state in the country to begin licensing cannabis companies. All 36 states that licensed ahead of Georgia face the exact same scenario with ongoing litigation and associated costs. I don't foresee those costs necessarily going away in the future, in that because it's a new industry and a new area of law, there are frequent, I'll just say, efforts to litigate in that there's no body of law currently in our state that can be referenced. So many legal attempts are made to establish a baseline in the legal realm so that there's a citation basis, if you will, that can create an expected outcome in the courts for a new industry in the state. One of the asks, the first ask that we have, is to onboard 2 additional attorneys at the Commission. Currently, we have faced, again, a very high level of lawsuits number-wise. That is in superior courts located across the state of Georgia. That's in state court level, district court, as well as federal court in Georgia. Over the course of the last 120 days, for example, the commission has had 37 active lawsuits ongoing. Currently, we only have one attorney and one paralegal to prepare the briefings for all of those. And I certainly want to give a shout out to the Commission's General Counsel, Jansen Head, who's with us for the hearing, who's been doing the yeoman's work in making sure that those cases are prepared properly. I'm certainly pleased to report that as it relates to the Commission's licensing process, Mr. Chairman, the work so far that both our legal office, legal staff in our office has done, as well as the hard work, which we very much appreciate from the state's Attorney General office, so far we have not lost a case through this process as it relates to our licensing. That's a very different place for Georgia than for other states that have met legal challenges and have not fared as well through the process. So certainly appreciate their hard work. However, I'm mindful, this is my 22nd year in state government, and I know that when we load a very high level of work on the backs of state employees, burnout is real, and people do move on. We have excellent staff, but we only have 6 of them at the commission currently. I'd like to keep those staff around, and I'd like to ask for help for them with this very heavy lift. So 2 attorneys, we've asked for some support staff for them as well. That's a pair of paralegals. The next set of asks that we have relates to field-based staff. Currently, we have 2 licensees, and so I know that 11 positions may sound a little bit surprising for a startup agency. However, we do anticipate being able to issue our other production licenses sometime during this fiscal year, and I would anticipate that to be before the end of the fiscal year. That will be our 4 Class 2 production licenses. And if you remember with the passage of SB 195 a couple of years ago by the General Assembly and signed into law, it transformed this industry into what's called a vertical integrated state. And that means that the only entities that can apply for dispensing licenses are the production licensees. Each of our production licensees, again, there are 6 of them, will be entitled to apply for 6 dispensing licenses. And so what we anticipate, Mr. Chairman, associated with this ask for staffing is that we will very quickly and in a short period of months go from a staff of 6 with 2 licenses to a agency regulating 42 licensees close to the end of this fiscal year. So it takes some time to recruit, to hire and retain those staff. It's very difficult to go through that process because cannabis is new. And we are accustomed to that process. Again, appreciate the staff and their work at the commission. We're requesting a pair of investigators and a pair of inspectors so that we can get to those opening inspections and get those dispensing licensees open and running in the state. One of the requirements for those is, of course, that they be fully compliant with the law and the commission's rules. We do conduct an initial inspection before we issue that license. I'll go briefly through the remaining positions, and I'll be happy to answer questions that you have. I mentioned that we are anticipating those licenses going from 2 to 42, and someone has to process those applications. Currently, we only have 1 regulatory compliance manager in the office. We're requesting 2 additional positions to be able to process those. There is an annual renewal that's associated with those, as well as ongoing compliance inspections, as I mentioned previously. And then last but not least, I'd like to ask for some help as well. Currently, I'm wearing many hats as executive director, not complaining about that in any sort of way. Certainly honored to be in the role. However, as we expand, there are some very important roles that need to have a dedicated professional assigned to them. One is information technology. The commission does receive a lot of data, and when I say a lot, I mean thousands of pages of data as it relates to the license and information, the litigation components that I mentioned, as well as patient information that comes into the commission when we try to pair them up with the information from the Department of Public Health. So I've asked for some funding for an information security manager, someone to properly manage that data, ensure that it's safe and secure, and managed properly, as well as the devices that will be needed for our staff and keeping those up to date and secure as well. Finally, Mr. Chair, is a business operations manager, the only individual in the office that's taking care of our virtual call center, our website, all of our office supply purchases, our logistics for the commission meetings, the reimbursements for those, the reimbursements for staff is me. And I think it would be a very good opportunity to have a dedicated individual who can make sure that those items stay on target and get handled properly in accordance with, of course, the state law. So I appreciate you taking a moment to let me share the needs of the commission, and I'm certainly happy to entertain any questions that you have.
I appreciate it. Let's start with, obviously, you're counting months. So it's been a long process for you. 31 months in is a pretty precise number. In your opinion, with the lawsuits we got going on, when are we realistically going to conclude this? I understand, I deeply understand the process of the appeal process that you had to navigate. Obviously, that took some time. I know that certain people in the room have spent a lot of time navigating these lawsuits. When are we realistically going to provide this help to Georgians that we promised oh so long ago at this point?
Appreciate the question, Mr. Chairman, and it's certainly the question of the day. Again, certainly pleased to report that the Commission did issue two, and that's the only two that we're afforded to issue. Both of our Class 1 production licenses were issued on September 21st of last year. One of those production licensees is Botanical Sciences. They're located in Glenville, Georgia. That's in Tattnall County, southeast Georgia. The other licensee is True Leaf, Georgia. They're located down in Adel, Georgia. That's Cook County in south central Georgia. Again, both of those issued in September. They are up. They are beginning their operations, and both of them have indicated in their public statements that they anticipate being able to put product on the shelf in that spring to summer timeframe. And so we anticipate that access for patients is literally a matter of weeks away for those licensees. Specific to your question on the litigation and issuing the Class 2 production licenses, my understanding is that there is currently only one, maybe two, of the Fulton County Superior Court stays that stand between the Commission issuing those licenses and not being able to. So it is a judicial order that we want to stay in compliance with. Obviously, we don't want to anger a judge somewhere before that judicial process, due process, is completed as required by Georgia law. But the moment that those stays are lifted, the Commission stands ready to issue the remaining four Class 2 production licenses, which will allow them to be able to begin this exact same process and get their dispensing licenses up and running as well.
In fear of this question straddling into another piece of legislation, should legislation come forward that potentially would open this up to more licenses, in your opinion, would that almost restart the clock on lawsuits, or where are we at?
Appreciate the question, Mr. Chairman, and since you didn't name a bill number, I'll just answer the hypothetical with a hypothetical, if that's agreeable with the members of the committee.
Certainly agreeable to me.
If a bill were to pass, say, for example, that usurped the protest process that the state put in place through the Georgia's Hope Act, I don't think it would be unreasonable for the state to anticipate that all of the participants in the process, those who were awarded their license based on a score, an evaluation component, may be very disappointed that competing and completing that process following the rules and requirements of the Hope Act has been undone. I imagine that they would be very upset and concerned in a legal matter as it relates to the state. I also suspect that the entities that did not file a lawsuit against the state may also decide to take legal action against the state because had they known that the mechanism to be awarded a license was filing a lawsuit, they may have taken that action initially rather than to not file a protest and not file a lawsuit. That's a hypothetical response, but I do think that it's reasonable to anticipate that the individuals who have respected the process and respected it for a number of months now, as well as the entities that have invested, frankly, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the litigation process, would probably be pretty deeply disturbed if this process were to be upended and the work that's been done on all sides has been disregarded. I hope that's a fair response, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we'll move on before I hypothetically end up in a lawsuit myself. So, so let's back up to the seed to sale software. I'm a little hung up on. I mean, look, I deal with QuickBooks all the time, and at least it's good for a couple of years before I got to buy the whole dang thing again. But I mean, we essentially are buying this software every year. Then, if it was a one-time $250,000, and you're telling me it's going to be at least 180, if not more, depending on the extent of it, we're basically buying this software every year, is what you're telling me.
I don't disagree, and I'll just say, Mr. Chairman, I shared in the very high level of sticker shock when we started to look at other states and see the signed contracts for seed to sale. It looks very consistent across the board in what we've been able to look at as far as recently executed. It is possible we could put this out for an RFP and land at below that, in which case, we obviously would remit those, we would return those funds to Treasury if we're successful in that effort. However, I wanted to be just right up front in the documentation that I submitted to the committee so that you could see what's been done in other states. It's not a number that we're pulling out of thin air. It's what we've seen consistent across the board in those states. The software that's there are two levels that I see in the marketplace for seed to sale tracking. There appear to be 2 or 3 front runner companies. I hate to apply labels, but pretty much they have the lion's share of seed to sale tracking contracts with states that regulate across the country. So again, the 2 or 3 companies consistent with all the states in those RFPs and their successful bids resulting in contracts. And then a second tier, smaller companies that provide similar or same service, but apparently do not provide some of the consistent bandwidth and tracking capabilities that the other software systems afford. So again, it could be very possible in response to an RFP, should we be awarded those funds in our budget, that we can come in under that mark, and I certainly hope that we can. But I don't want to set expectations that are different than what we've seen elsewhere.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll get you out of here because I know the day's getting long here. But can you update me real quickly on the commission had some rules that didn't go well? I think we're back at the drawing board. Can you give me an update on where that stands?
I'll be glad to. I appreciate the question, Mr. Chairman. So the commission has rules that are out for public comment currently. They are posted with a rules hearing set for March the 8th. And I think your question goes specific to the previously posted rules. One of the items that we discovered in the process for promulgating rules is that the law requires a filing notice to be given to the Office of Legislative Counsel. And yours truly could not provide documentation. I simply couldn't find an email or a letter that I had sent with transmitting our previously proposed rules to the Office of Legislative Counsel. That documentation, since we are a litigation-heavy environment, we made the decision that it was most important that we have that documentation in place, demonstrating that we comply with Georgia law. We've been in this spot previously with making sure that we provide documentation to comply with the law, but it's out of an abundance of caution for doing it right that we reposted those. I would like to note, if I could, Mr. Chair, in leveraging the time, we did have the ability to work into the newly posted rules some of the public feedback and comments that we received from the previously posted rules. And it's my firm belief that that's going to result in a little bit improved timeline for our independent laboratories to be able to provide testing. That testing is required no matter how fast licenses are issued without a passing certificate of analysis that tests for those potency levels, microbials, mycotoxins, heavy metals, etc. Product can't go to market. It's not safe for anyone to consume without that level of testing, which is outlined in the Act. But we did afford interested laboratories some additional time to get their accreditation done, but to allow them to be able to get started testing sooner. So while there may be a little bit of a delay, approximately 50 days, difference between having to repost the rules and when they'll take effect, we do anticipate a net gain of about 60 days. That would be testing in the April window instead of the July window as a result of reposting the rules.
Thank you for that transparency. As we continue to lose members, we need to get through. So I appreciate you being here.
Mr. Chairman, I think my car key might get locked up in my office.
I appreciate that very much. If you don't mind, will you grab mine when you're up there? Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Appreciate the time, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, if I could, I know you inquired about litigation, and I'd like to just leave you with an update, if I could, on our current lawsuits and what the status is on those. And I appreciate the time for members and staff. Thank you.
As long as that means I don't have to testify, I'll take it. All right, moving on. Last line item here, actually, other than a point of privilege, I'll say afterwards. Office Commissioner Insurance. Commissioner King phoned me earlier today, sends his regards. He is stuck in another state. But we do have Mr. Burleson to present us as efficiently as possible their requests.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Thanks for the opportunity. As Chairman said, the commissioner's out of state, was already planning on going out there when this hearing got scheduled, so you guys are stuck with me.
We're looking at section 29, page 12, committee.
My name is Weston Burleson. I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Commissioner's Office. We'll start on, I guess, line 29.1.1 under Departmental Administration, $2,000 cost of living adjustments for all eligible employees. This will obviously be reflected in all of our programs moving forward. We're very grateful for this increase. It will help with our ongoing recruitment and retention efforts. And then lines 29.1.2 through .4 just reflect the annual adjustments for DOAS, Teamworks Merit System Assessment billings. Again, these lines are going to be in every program as we move through. The one individual item on under Department of Administration on line 29.1.5 is a $150,000 transfer of other funds to Safety Fire. These will go to fund 4 additional manufactured housing safety compliance positions. And then in enforcement, again, lines .1 through .3, just COLA raises, annual adjustments. 29.2.4 is a $30,000 transfer. This is state funds. This is also going to Safety Fire for those same 4 positions. And then in Safety Fire, obviously you see the COLA cost of living adjustments and regular adjustments there. And then you'll see on 29.3.5 the transfers from all the other divisions into Safety Fire, again, for those 4 positions. By transferring these dollars, we'll be able to fund these positions without asking for additional money from the state. Some historical context there. When Commissioner King was first appointed, July of 2019, there were 98 positions in Safety Fire. That number dropped down to 86 the following year due to COVID-related budget restraints. And we've been slowly building back up. We added 10 more positions in July of 2021, and then today we're at 116. Again, thanks to your work. You're supporting us for some of the transfers within, and then some additional revenues and some retained revenues we've been able to keep. With the 4 new positions that we're trying to fund today in today's budget request, that now leaves us about 17 positions short to be fully staffed in Safety Fire. Again, this is something we've been working on over the last several years. At full staff, we'll be able to meet all of our required inspections of buildings, elevators, nursing homes, as well as arson investigations. As Georgia's continued to grow and attract new job creation, we've been forced to prioritize the inspections of new construction at our current staffing levels at the expense of inspections of existing buildings under our jurisdiction. So there's some buildings that we're just not getting to because we're prioritizing the new construction, as new jobs are created. All of the new, especially the EV construction down in Bryan County, that we have to inspect all of those facilities as well. We've been humble in our budget requests over the last few years, and again, you guys have provided us the funds when we've asked for them. So we're just asking today, any additional revenue, if we can put that towards some of those 17. We're not asking for necessarily all 17, just whatever the committee seems appropriate. Chad DeBella, our CFO, is here with me today. He's already provided a full breakdown, prioritized by position to committee staff, and so we just would appreciate your consideration there. Moving to insurance regulation, again, lines 29.4.1 through 4.4 are the same numbers. And then 29.4.5 is the transfer funds, again, for those positions. And then moving down to reinsurance, 29.5.1 is the COLA adjustments for the team member that oversees this program. 29.5.2 is the big number on here. That's the $92 million increase in the program to cover the state's portion of the reinsurance program. And again, that program offsets high cost claims on Georgia's individual market. Thanks to this program, you've heard the governor talk about it. Premiums have gone down average about 12% statewide, including 30% in some of the most rural parts of the state. And we've also been able to attract additional carriers to the market. We're up to 11 now. We only had 4 just a few years ago. And again, that's because we're helping them offset these high cost claims, and it's bringing more folks, and we're seeing higher enrollments on the exchange as well. And then lastly, if you just look at special fraud on the last page, the only changes there are just COLA adjustments and the other regular adjustments. Again, thank you for the support you've given us over the last several years. This is our 4th full year since the commissioner took over. We put a lot of work into rebuilding this agency that had frankly just been neglected by previous commissioners. There's really no other way to put that. I know you've heard something similar on the labor side as well. We look forward to continuing working with you all. Again, Chad DeBella is our CFO. He's here with me. I'm sure you guys will have some additional questions, but that covers our main items.
I'll start with saying I've been on appropriations for 3 years. I'm not sure if I've heard humble asking $92 million in the same presentation, but we'll go with that.
That 92 is not the humble ask for the record.
But I'll start there.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, I know this is somewhat out of your purview, but for the benefit of everybody, have there been some discussions where we think that number's headed? I know we talked about it internally, but just for the benefit for the committee, do you guys have anything on that?
I don't have an exact number for you. Obviously, the $92 million is actually from the amended budget, and so the governor's put it there's a placeholder for 24. We did see significant increase in enrollment compared to the rest of the country. I think we had 200,000 more people on the rolls this year, so we will see that number go up. I can't, I don't know if any rough estimates have been calculated as of yet. That the state's portion is about the federal grant is about 55% of the total cost, and the state portion is the 55-45 split. And then we just don't know the numbers till after all the claims have been paid on the previous plan year. But I would imagine we'll see an increase because of the increase of enrollment. But you're not going to see a dramatic $92 million increase. I think we're closer to finding that floor, and then it'll adjust, and it could even go up and down in future years.
Anyone else on the committee? All right. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right. That's the end of our official agenda, but I will say there's a gentleman in the audience that I know he would love to catch y'all at some point. We'll discuss this. We can discuss this somewhat offline, but you've been presented a packet of information on the Georgia games. Started back when the Olympics came to Atlanta, and I know that unfortunately, since I've said no to so many people that would love to come before, I'm going to have to say no, but I did want to acknowledge you being here, and I appreciate your patience with this meeting. Committee members, I encourage you to look at this and speak with him on the way out, and we'll take it up and discuss it internally as we move forward. But just wanted to acknowledge you and appreciate you being here and appreciate your patience and appreciate you providing this information. Thank you. All right, y'all. Unless somebody is upset about it, we will stand adjourned.